everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and oh man, do we have another great show. And it's easy. I say it every week. When you have a great guest coupled with a great book, you're automatically going to have a great show. And this show is, I got to be honest with you, I'm excited about it. This book by Dr. Stephen Rogelberg, entitled Glad We Met, The Art and Science of One-to-One Meetings. Now, listen, folks. I'm a coach, right? I deal in the life and business space as a coach. And this book was extraordinarily helpful to me as a coach. Matter of fact, I just wrote a client. I said, this is going to help me take my business to another level. Help me, because I learned so much of things like I go, okay, I took that for granted. I took this for granted. And folks, but I want to just say this to you about those of you who listen to the show, who are founders, owners, C-suite professionals, managers that listen and watch this show on DBTV. Thank you for everybody on DBTV all over the world for watching the show, or who are coast to coast on the radio, listening to the show every Thursday, or people who download the show. You need to have one-on-ones with your people. I know we talk about we've got too many meetings and we got so many meetings, but folks, there is power in one-to-one meetings that you're probably missing. And here's the beauty of it. Dr. Stephen Rogelberg, who wrote this book and has done the research and has done the science and has combined it with the art, is going to explain to us today why it is so important and how you can make them more effective and productive. Because I'm telling you, there's power that you're probably missing. You're probably missing productivity in your people, loyalty in your people that could be gained simply by having one-on-one conversations. And so we're going to get to him. But before we do that, let's do what we do every week. Right? We are four-part people. We are physical, mental, emotional, spiritual people. And the fact of the matter is we got to be working on ourselves every day. If we're not working on ourselves every day, well, we don't stay static. And as I say often, if we're not growing, we're dying, right? So we need to be an active participant in the growth in these four areas. So what we do is we have you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, 10 being doesn't get any better than that. And for instance, let's take the physical area, right? If you were to rank yourself, scale of 1 to 10 on getting enough exercise, eating right, drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, how would you rate yourself, 5 being average? Now listen, whatever that number is, don't be alarmed. Okay, that's just going to be your starting point of where we can improve from, right? And what little tweaks can you make to make those improvements, right? Maybe it's the bag of chips that you need to get your elbow out of. Maybe it's that can of soda you need to drop. Whatever it may be, right? What can you do to change, just to bring it up from, if you're 2, maybe get it to 2.5, right? If you're 7, let's go 7.25. Right? Whatever that may be. All right. That's your first number. Second number is your mental intellectual number, right? Listen, you can't be on the couch, being a couch potato, somehow absorbing information, thinking that that's how you're going to grow your knowledge and understanding and wisdom in whatever you do and in your life. No, you need to be an active participant in growing your knowledge and wisdom in your job, in your life, in your relationships. It's a great thing to do to enhance that. Read a book and then apply it. Take the information you have in this book, like for instance, Glad We Met, right? And then apply that information. Take it out to the street. That's where wisdom, knowledge, and understanding happens. That's where growth happens, right? That's where it's going to happen. Be curious. Well, I read that over and over and over again in this book. Be curious, but then take action, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say you're doing that mental intellectual number? The third number is the emotional area. And make it simple. I mean, Dr. Kahneman has done all sorts of work, and Dr. Goleman has done all sorts of work in emotional intelligence, emotional quotients, and Stephen Rogelberg makes the point here that we cannot just be tactical. We need to be personal, and in our one-to-ones. And when we say personal, it means that we have to be actively listening with an empathetic ear and with empathetic responses. Empathy is so important. So we divide this up into two areas. How would you say you're doing when it comes to controlling your emotions when you're under stress and pressure? And then two, how well are you able to tap into and understand the emotions of another person? And on a scale of 1 to 10, what number would you give yourself? And then finally, there's the spiritual area. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with spiritual area. I don't want you to be uncomfortable because we're all spiritual beings. The fact of the matter is, you've removed the physical, mental, emotional. What are you left with? Well, we met the spiritual, and we operate by faith. You've probably made plans for the future. They haven't happened yet. You believe they're going to happen. You pushed your button or you turned your key on your car. You believed it was going to start. You drank your cup of coffee, believed it wasn't poisonous. You sat in a chair, believed it wasn't going to collapse. All done by faith. And then what happens when chaos occurs in your life? What brings you back to centeredness? And then when things go wrong, what brings you a sense of joy? Is it God? Is it nature? Is it something else? And then is it working for you? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say that area of your life is working? So these 4 areas, like the air and the tires of your car, if one tire is low, it makes it difficult to steer the car. If all 4 tires are too low, what happens is over the course of time, you're going to ruin the car, right? So we want to bring the air in those 4 areas up to the right levels. And speaking of somebody who does that, his name is Dr. Stephen G. Rogelberg. He's an organizational psychologist who holds the title of Chancellor's Professor at UNC Charlotte for distinguished national and international interdisciplinary contributions. He's an award-winning teacher and recipient of the very prestigious Humboldt Award for his research. He's been called the world's leading expert in how to fix meetings. Stephen keynote spans the globe, focusing on the science of meetings and meetings strategic linkage to include inclusion and diversity, engagement, leadership, innovation, and organizational success. He's consulted for small and large organizations like IBM, Amazon, you may have heard of those, TIA, Cisco, Procter & Gamble, the list goes on and on. He has more than 100 publications addressing issues such as team effectiveness, leadership engagement, and meetings at work. His research has been profiled in outlets such as the CBS This Morning, BBC News, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, NPR, among others. And he joins us here with his highly anticipated and lauded new book, Glad We Met, The Art and Science of One-to-One Meetings. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to A New Direction, and welcome for the first time, Dr. Stephen G. Rogelberg. Welcome, Stephen, to A New Direction.
Thank you so much. Loved your lead in. That's a great exercise that you put your viewers and your through. That was great.
Thank you. Yeah, that's something we started 6 years ago. I just never stopped doing it. I just feel like we just need to check in and work on ourselves, right? Which this book does a beautiful job of doing, is helping us work on ourselves. And I'll tell you what, this was a great book for me, just personally for me as a coach, and I really enjoyed it. I think one of the things that struck out to me is right away in the preface, which you entitled Vision, Approach, and the Science. And you said, based on your research and the research of others, 20 to 50% of all meetings are one-to-ones, which means that there's anywhere from 200 million to 500 million one-to-one meetings each day around the world. And the investment in one-to-one meetings is $1.25 billion per day. That's staggering to me, and yet we don't talk about it very much. So help us make that adjustment in our thinking.
Yeah, I mean, our days are filled with one-on-one encounters, interactions. What I want to focus on in this book is a particular type of one-on-one meeting. And it's important to differentiate it from others because it's a very special meeting. And you certainly alluded to it very well in your intro statements. So when I talk about a one-on-one meeting, I'm talking about a regular and reoccurring meeting between a manager and their directs, where the manager is orchestrating and facilitating the meeting, but it's not for them. It's for their direct. It's for their direct to share what's on their minds, their concerns, their challenges, their obstacles, and for the manager to engage with that content how the direct wants you to engage, right? So it's listen, support, empathize, as you noted. In so many ways, these one-on-one meetings are where you can truly see your people, and everyone wants to be seen. And when we have these one-on-one meetings, the outcomes are phenomenal. Managers who have these regular one-on-one meetings like I described, their employees are reporting much higher levels of thriving, engagement, retention of your top talent, individual success, the team success. And then let's not forget, managers are ultimately evaluated by the success of those who report into them. So yes, you're elevating others, but really you're elevating yourself. And furthermore, we even have some research to suggest that when managers have these regular one-on-one meetings with their folks, people actually wind up saving various issues for these one-on-ones as opposed to interrupting the manager throughout the course of the week. So managers often report a greater opportunity to have uninterrupted time in their work days. So ultimately, this is the one meeting that should never be an email. This is the one meeting that while we might think it's optional, it's not. This is this is where leadership happens. This is the stage for leadership. And if we stop and reflect, right, and we think through our Rolodex of our own history, when someone with power took a real interest in us, how it affected us, how it affected our feelings about them, our connection to the entity that they represent, right? So we can all draw from our own personal experience the powerfulness of these types of interactions. And now we just need to do them, and we need to do them right, with us helping to elevate someone else, not ourselves.
So beautifully said. I want to let people know about this structure of this book a little bit, because I think this is important to the book. The structure of this book is such that what Stephen has done here is there are quizzes that you take, find out where you're at with one-to-one meetings. There are actual pieces in this book that you can use as assessments for your one-to-ones to find out where you're at, how you're doing them well. It's not just something to read. There is literally practical, applicable things that he has placed within this book, in each section of the book, and it's 4 sections of this book, that are going to help you really construct a great meeting from the pre-start to the start, to the heart, to the end. Okay. And I know you don't know what I mean there. I'm just telling you that's part of the book. But it really is powerful to do this. And I also want to mention, and Stephen, help me out this, because I do want to mention this up front, that all the proceeds from this book are going to cancer, specifically help the people understand.
Yeah, that'll be my pleasure. So I'm really passionate around getting the science out there. This content can really help humans, help organizations, and help foster success. And I'm so passionate around it that basically I've decided to donate all my royalties to the American Cancer Society in honor of my sister-in-law and her fight with cancer. And so there's not a personal gain here. There's just the desire to try to get the science out there broadly. And so thank you for the opportunity to share that. And I hope folks will check out the book, because it has, I think, really helpful insights, but also certainly help. It always feels good to help support cancer research.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that that's another thing that excites folks. And, Jay, it's also a little self-serving, because I hate telling people to buy my book, but I'm much more comfortable saying, hey, buy the book, and I'm not making money from it. It's going to cancer research. So it did help ease my conscience when I plugged the book.
That's awesome. One of the things about the structure of the book that I think is really important is that each chapter is a question.
Yeah.
And as an interviewer and the host, you made my job really, really easy. So I'm going to just start digging in, and then we'll dig into these one at a time. But chapter 1 is, do I really need to do one-to-ones? And of course, there's a little quiz that you give us. And I know there's the simple answer is yes, otherwise you wouldn't have wrote the book. Yeah. But help us understand why that's even a question, I guess, for us to understand, whose responsibility is it, why we should do it, what's the importance of it.
It is really interesting that it has to be a question, right? That we don't think necessarily that we should be investing our busy lives in elevating other humans. We think that people are incredibly self-sufficient, and we just kind of go about our thing. We assume that they're just going about their thing. and we don't stop and consider the amazing role we can have in others' lives, and especially those who report into us. So while intuitively it's hard for folks, I mean, how could you not think that one-on-one meetings with your people are important? But in practice, it's not happening in the way that you get the benefits, right? So you often see one-on-ones that turn into status update meetings for the manager, right? That's not for the direct. That's for the manager getting what they need. And that's not the goal here. Managers can get status updates any number of ways, right? They can ask for an email update. They could have an asynchronous document. They could have another meeting, a team meeting where they ask everyone to do updates. So managers have the power. They can get updates any way they want. But it's so often when they have one-on-one meetings, they just turn the agenda to them, and therefore you don't get these benefits. So ultimately, what that chapter is trying to sell is these one-on-one meetings can truly make lives, including your own, much better, much more successful, much greater thriving. And think about what happens if you don't do them, right? So one of the things I try to emphasize throughout the book is this notion of signals. We are always signaling to people about who we are, what our values are, and our behavior signal these values, but things that we don't do also signal our values. So what I was really trying to emphasize in this chapter is that when you don't do these things, you're communicating to your people that you don't really care, that you're not really vested in their success. And now you probably don't feel that in your heart, but by not doing them, that's what you are implicitly communicating. So the outcomes are clear. We know Jay, the Gallup study was 2.5 million people. And there was a strong linkage. Those people who are having these meaningful one-on-ones were 3 times more likely to be engaged. We all know the adage that people tend not to leave bad jobs. They leave bad bosses, right? We all know the feeling when someone truly listens and offers support. So it's just, we need to remind ourselves, right, that this is an activity, that this humanistic activity is essential. And it's really not an option.
Yeah, and you point out that they're critical, and then you also point out here in this chapter that regularly scheduled and successful one-to-ones are essential to 7 interconnected and important outcomes. And I'm just going to list these out here, and you can address, if there's one that you want to really address, let's hit it. But employee engagement, team member success, life satisfaction, manager success, promoting employee growth and development, diversity and inclusion, building relationships. I mean, and they're all interconnected, and this is a result of doing regularly scheduled, which is also, I think, important, regularly scheduled one-to-one, because often in the business world I see that I am in, that what we do? We do a yearly one-to-one to go over what you probably didn't do well.
Right.
And there's a whole lot more here that you're talking about that makes it even more critical to do them more frequently.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. When these things are done very sporadically, again, it's a signal that you're not overly invested in your people. When you do them regularly, though, right, now you start creating this meaningful connection, this meaningful narrative. You start building momentum, and the value just keeps increasing, right? Because the story is more clear. And again, we can think about this in our relationships. When we talk to a dear friend just once a year, it tends to be very high level, big events. But when we're talking to someone more regularly, it's more real. It's more genuine, right? The story tends to continue from week to week to week. And so the cadence matters. And basically what the research suggests is that weekly or every other week yields the greatest benefits. Monthly, the benefits decrease quite a bit. It's still better than nothing, but it's still quite a big drop. Interestingly, though, Jay, that when you ask employees their desired cadence, it lines up perfectly with the research. They want weekly or every other week one-on-ones when they're done right. So you have the research supports it, employees want it. And what's so interesting is in the research we collected, no matter how busy the employee was, they still wanted meaningful one-on-one time with their manager. So they recognized that this was the one meeting that should not be an email. And furthermore, what emerged from this research was that this was not a US based thing. We did cross-cultural research, looked at, 4 different countries. I think it was across 3 different continents, and it was universal. But again, this is not a surprise. Connection, meaningful connection, is a human condition. So we know cross-culturally these are valuable. And then the other interesting little twist, Jay, was the more senior folks actually wanted even more one-on-ones than the junior folks, counter to generational stereotypes. And that's because they know how valuable, meaningful one-on-one time is with their managers.
That's awesome, and it does come as a surprise to me, because typically we don't think of it that way. We think that the older, want to be left alone, and
Right.
so that is really counterintuitive.
Mhm.
Because typically as we age, we isolate, not sometimes by choice, but we have a tendency to isolate.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's a result of that. It's beautiful. This is just, we're just getting started. This is the beauty of the book. Glad we met, right? Glad we met. The art and science of one-to-one meetings. You're listening to Dr. Stephen Rogelberg here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, epic physical therapy, whether you're coming from injury, surgery, suffering everyday aches and pains, having difficulty performing in daily activities, maybe you're a professional athlete and just want to move and feel better. Listen, the elite team at Epic Physical Therapy will customize a treatment plan specifically for your needs. So when you're ready for your epic relief, epic recovery, and epic results, don't look any further. Go to epicpt.com. It's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors, for more than 39 years, they've been helping people transition in life. And you go, wait, I thought they were real estate people. Yeah, but here's the deal. Think about it. Every place you've ever lived has been a life transition, and they know how to take the stress out of that part of that transition. So when you're ready to sell your home or buy your next home or your first home, start with Linda Craft Team Realtors. That's lindacraft.com. It's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Dr. Stephen Rogelberg. Glad we met is the name of the book, The Art and Science of One-to-One Meetings. We're just getting started. I do want to say something about one of my favorite psychological words as a psychological professional, and that is about one-to-ones, overcoming fundamental attribution error. Because I do believe, and I think you make a point, a subtle point at this end of chapter 1, is that oftentimes by not having these one-to-ones, we do have a distortion bias of how we may see our people, but having these one-to-ones can overcome fundamental attribution error. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So the notion of fundamental attribution error is the idea that when we see a behavior done by someone else, and let's say it's a behavior that we don't like, the person's late. We are quick to jump to an assumption that they're late because they're lazy. We tend to make an internal attribution for their behavior, as opposed to an external attribution is, well, they're late because something came up. They were helping their child, or they had traffic, or, they had a long distance to travel. And so humans tend to create more internal attributions as opposed to external attributions, which are much more generous and kind. When you are meeting with people more regularly and fostering a more meaningful relationship, then they actually tend to make more external attributions around behaviors that they don't like. So that same lateness behavior, once we have a relationship, they start to give you the benefit of the doubt. They go, no, Jay is an on-time person. Something must have happened. I hope he's okay. Very different set of cognitions. And so when we think about, a manager and their people, their people are constantly making assumptions, and we can quickly lose control of the narrative that's around us. This can ultimately derail relationships as well as derail an employee's motivation, right? If they see your motives as nefarious, for example, then they just won't engage as hard in their role. And so these one-on-ones, they start to create a foundation of empathy, of understanding, and of meaning. And the more you do that, You get these, in a sense, you wipe away the fundamental attribution error. Managers need to always recognize that in the absence of communication is communication. There's always communication. And so when you're not engaging strongly with their people, they're creating narratives, but they're doing it through rumors and the grapevine and through their peers. And quickly, again, you start to lose control of this narrative. So this is what we need managers to do, is an active investment in communication and engagement so that these good foundations become strong and powerful.
I see in everyday life, and I think I know we all experience fundamental attribution error. It's one of my favorite things when I was teaching psychology. It was one of my favorite little topics, Scott, because we all do it. We all have the bias. I'm going to kind of combine chapters 3 and 4 because we talked about cadence.
Sure.
Chapter 3 is can't I just meet when I have something to say? And you talk about planning, which I think is important here. But then as we get into the structure of these one-to-ones, chapter 4 is how should I schedule one-to-ones, same day, clustered, or spread out? So as you've already given us a little intro into cadence about how frequently we should do these. Talk about now, how should I schedule these if I want to be effective?
Yeah. We collected quite a bit of data looking at kind of the effects of different scheduling cadences on individuals. And basically, where the research has generally landed is that meetings should be clustered together with 10 to 15-minute breaks between them. And then this allows for some periods of time on a calendar where someone can have uninterrupted block of focus time where they potentially could get into flow. So we want to kind of schedule these meetings. We cluster them. We put them around naturally occurring breaks like lunch. And then ultimately what this does is it decreases interruptions in one's workday. And that's really important because interruptions certainly cause stress and hurt productivity. All right. So we know we want things clustered with these 10-minute, 15-minute breaks. How this applies to one-on-ones is that we want to try to schedule them in a way that allows for that clustering and opportunities for flow. Best practices, the manager says, okay, here are my windows. These windows would allow me to create that opportunity for flow. Now you give those windows to your directs and you say, you can schedule within these windows in a way that maximizes your opportunity for flow. And so that type of a process basically helps everyone be more productive, and it presents as much more respectful to people's time.
Yeah, I think as a manager, I know, or as somebody who's a CEO, we can often feel like we're overwhelmed. This is just one more thing that I need to do.
Yeah.
But I think, if you're scheduling and planning these out right, as you discussed in chapters 3 and 4, and putting these together, actually there's a way to do it that actually you may be thinking you're taking away time, but actually you're increasing productivity.
Yeah. So first of all, I do have a chapter in the book that talks about how to eliminate bad meetings. So, I do recognize that sometimes we have to free up time. And obviously I'm a meeting scholar. So my first book, The Surprising Science of Meetings, really got into how to stop wasting time in meetings. So I do think that people should look for opportunities to decrease activities that are not critical. But yes, going back to your point, these things do make time. What we saw is that when you have these one-on-ones and you're addressing these obstacles and challenges, there's less rework time, right? Because people are aligned. You're coordinating activities, you're helping clarify priorities. All these things help find time. And so they really are, they're an investment. It's one of those perfect examples of you're taking, in a sense, a step back, but you're taking 2 steps forward. And again, we can channel this insight, right? So the research shows this, but if we think about it from our own selves, when we had a manager that was meeting with us and taking an interest and wanted to explore our challenges and obstacles, it allowed us to be more effective. and ultimately in less time. And we didn't have to keep bothering the manager with more questions throughout. So we can all, like, the science is one thing, but we know this too if we reflect. And this is why, this book, unlike my first one, I really, I kind of framed it as this art and science, because this is one of those topics that is both. And so the book is not written as, okay, do A, now do B, now do C, because that's the magic formula, because that's not true. What the book says is, here's a variety of choices that you can make. Now pick, be intentional, make the right choice, but make a choice, act.
While listen, while we're kind of briefly got to chapter 15, which is I'm drowning in meetings. Now what do I do? Why don't we go there and we'll pop back, but why don't we talk about I'm drowning in meetings? What do I do? And you have some strategies to decrease waste of time in meetings. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit to help folks kind of maybe not feel like they're so overwhelmed by these meetings.
Sure. No, I think that's great. And so while I certainly advocate for a meeting diet that's principled, we just don't want to do a wholesale elimination of meetings. Meetings are an evolution from the command and control systems of the Industrial Revolution, where we devalued humans. Meetings are critical to communication, cooperation, consensus, decision-making, coordination. So we need meetings. What we want to eliminate is wasted time in meetings. And there's lots of ways of doing that. First of all, we want to shrink meeting sizes. Right now, we over-invite. We want to shrink meeting times, especially because of something called Parkinson's law, which is the idea that work expands to fill whatever time is allotted to it. So if you schedule a meeting for 60 minutes, it will take 60 minutes. But we can use Parkinson's law to our advantage, right? We can start scheduling our meetings for 40 minutes, 25 minutes, and we will get it done. We also want to start thinking more strategically about how we structure our meetings. So, for example, agendas are often typically organized as a set of topics to be discussed. And what I want to challenge leaders to do is to frame their agendas and meetings as a set of questions to be answered. And by doing that, now you have to stop and really think, why am I having this meeting? You have a better sense of who has to be at the meeting. They're relevant to the questions. You know if the meeting has been successful or when to end the meeting. The questions have been answered. Having your meeting framed as questions also creates an engaging challenge for folks, because people love to tackle that. And Jay, if you just can't think of any questions, it likely means you don't need a meeting. So there's a variety of strategies that we can take. Related to this is that we need managers to start to have new conversations around meetings. Yes, we actually need to have a meeting about a meeting. And how could we not? If we know that people are investing 5 to 25 hours a week in meetings, yes, we should have a conversation around whether this is working for us. We don't think it's outlandish that we would have a conversation assessing whether our technology is working for us. Our laptops are working for us, like those are normalized. Well, this is more expensive. This is more time consuming. So we want to start meeting with our teams to start having conversations around meetings, their ideas for making them more, to make them better. Where can we push, what reoccurring meetings perhaps can be shrunk or decreased, right? So we want to start creating some new norms around who to invite and who not to invite, how to keep people in the loop, right? Because right now, while people don't like meetings, they get worried if they're not invited to a meeting. So as a result, we need to help convince them as a collective that when someone doesn't attend a meeting, it's because we respect their time and we're going to keep them in the loop. And this is what that's going to look like. And they can attend future meetings if this isn't working for them. So these types of conversations just keep allowing us to shrink wasted time in meetings, bloated meetings, in a healthy way, right? This is about, it's kind of like how you started the whole broadcast, right? You were talking about these 4 tires and filling all 4, right? And if we go on a crash diet, we know that doesn't work. So by starting to engage in this more holistic evaluation of your meetings, now you're changing the ecosystem and you're assuring that they truly work for us. This then gives you more time And then you can invest that time strategically. And you should obviously invest that time in doing meaningful work, innovation, bigger thinking, not just fighting fires, but you also want to take that time and invest it in your people.
Yeah.
And one-on-one meetings, there's the mechanism for doing that.
And that's exactly where I was hoping you would go, is that, you know what, if we can evaluate these group meetings and go, you know what, we don't have to do an hour and a half. We could do this in 25 minutes.
Yep.
Create space.
Yep.
Right, to do the one-on-one meetings, which are going to be so much more important and going to provide so much more detail. And then I know that there are managers and there are people who go, I don't even know. I'm a little uncomfortable. I don't know where to start. And chapter 6 is a great question. So, and I'm hearing a manager say this, is a good, how are you enough?
Mm-hmm.
When I'm starting a meeting? I mean, what questions should how should I get this thing rolling?
That's great. So interestingly, how you started this broadcast is very aligned with the science. So a good how are you is certainly a great question, to ask, but it doesn't work because people basically have automatic responses. They'll say good, great, pretty good, right? They're not really giving you anything to work with. They're just triggering an automatic response. But the research shows that if you switch it up and basically say, Jay, I'm really interested in how you are. What I would like you to do is tell me on a 10-point scale, with 1 being bad, 10 being great. Like, how are you? How are you showing up today? When you do it that way, you start to get responses of 5s and 6s and 7s. And now you have something to work with. Now you can say, tell me more. Why are you a 5? You can say, how can I help you? What can I do that might help you become a 6 or a 7? And so you have data. So that type of a question is super helpful. My other favorite starting question is when a manager makes a reference to a past one-on-one. So they basically say, Jay, I know you were struggling with X and you were going to try Y. How did that go for you? We don't want the conversation to completely go in that direction because, again, if the employee doesn't want to, that's fine because this is not our meeting. But asking a question like that is such a powerful message, right? It tells that person that you were listening, that you cared. So those two questions together are a fantastic combo for getting the meeting started in a really good way.
And you talk about putting questions in categories because you have engagement, relationship building, productivity challenges, checking in, development, growth, career giving, receiving feedback. I think the one that maybe where we can be a little bit off center is this relationship building piece.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think from a business standpoint, we want to focus in on checking in where you're at, the productivity, what's going on with your work.
Yeah.
Right. We probably don't really do a whole lot with feedback as much as we probably should. And then I don't know that we do a whole lot with development and growth. I think we do some.
Mm-hmm.
I think we do, but I don't know we do. But there is this, you talk about it. I think it's in this chapter, relationship building part 1, get to know your direct on a more personal level. And asking those type of questions. And then part 2 is getting to know one another's work related preferences.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there's talk about the importance of why you started there with the personal relationship versus the business piece.
We're people, right? We're humans. And to form a connection with someone, we have to feel like they know us and understand us. These are not therapy sessions in any way. These are not sessions designed to probe into personal lives in a way that's inappropriate for work. It's not that. But we can certainly take an interest in the other person. Tell me, what are you listening or watching something right now that's really fun for you? Do you have something planned that's exciting for you? And, how many kids do you have, right? So these are basics of that allow us just to understand, in a sense, who the person is across the table from us. Now, we can't charge into these questions, right? We just want these things to feel more natural, but we can still dedicate ourselves to periodically investing in questions to get to know the person as a person. And so, and vice versa, by the way, we want them to understand us as a person. But again, it's not our meeting, so we don't want to impose our narratives. So ultimately, the getting to know you from a personal perspective is just a long-term commitment that's lightweight, right? You don't charge on it. You let it be dictated by how it's going. Because some people are going to be more comfortable talking about it and others won't, right? But asking people what they are listening to on podcasts, right? That's a nice, easy question that you can get some interesting content. The other piece around getting to know their work preferences, this is something you absolutely can lean strongly into, right? So if I ask you, Jay, I would love to know, about a past manager you had that you thought was really good. What did they do that you thought made them so effective? Or Jay, I want you to tell me about a manager you thought was really bad. What did they do? That tells you a lot, right? If I ask you, Jay, how would you like me to deliver feedback to you? What's your preference? Is this something you want me to kind of save up? Do you want, more constant? Tell me more about your preferences and how you like to receive feedback, right? These are all fabulous questions to establishing kind of this more genuine connection where you're not just making assumptions. And that's probably the key, right? Because in the absence of this information, we just make assumptions, and these assumptions might not be accurate.
His name is Dr. Stephen Rogelberg. The book is entitled Glad We Met, The Art and Science of One-to-One Meetings. All proceeds go to cancer research in honor of his sister-in-law and her fight. Listen, when you're purchasing this book, you need to know that what you are doing is you're contributing to cancer research. And it's a great cause. But I'm going to tell you what, you're going to get a double bonus, because not only are you going to do something that's awesome for the world, but at the same time, what you're going to do is you're going to get something great out of this book. I promise you will. It is really a special, special book. So glad I read it twice. Just saying. Listen, you're listening to Dr. Stephen G. Rogelberg here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, Epic Physical Therapy, their facilities offer the most advanced, top-of-the-line, cutting-edge equipment, including the Ultra G anti-gravity treadmill, Normatec compression sleeves, and Game Ready, which is my favorite. That's just a few. Listen, they're trained and certified in the most comprehensive cutting-edge treatments available, such as blood flow restriction therapy, dry needling, cupping, and that's just a few. It doesn't matter. Listen, when you're ready for your epic relief, epic recovery, epic results, I go. Just go to epicpt.com. It's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors, 39 years, known as the legends of customer service, helping thousands of people all over the world. They'll serve you. And just to let you know, they are hiring right now. So if you've got a license and you're in the Research Triangle Park area of North Carolina, that's Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and you're looking for a place to hang your license, contact Linda Craft Team Realtors. Just go to lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com, and look for the team link on the side. You'll be glad that you did. It's lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend. I think I'd call you friend. Can I call you friend, Steve?
I think that's sweet.
Stephen Rogelberg. Book, Glad We Met. And I am glad we met, by the way. The Art and Science of One-to-One Meetings. I'm going to dive into chapter 7. I'm just going to ask the question that you ask and let you jump on it. Do these meetings, these one-to-ones, do they need an agenda?
Yeah. Interestingly, this was a kind of a surprise that emerged from the research. I was expecting there'd be, no, they don't need an agenda, but having an agenda was actually tied to the effectiveness of these one-on-ones. However, it's not a heavy agenda. It's just a lightweight plan of action. But what was most important was that the direct was driving that agenda, right? That they're creating the plan of action. And so there's really two principal ways of doing this. So one is kind of the core question approach. where a manager says, okay, they say, here are my 5 or 6 core questions. They can rotate them over time. They diversify them, short-term, long-term orientation. But it could be, tell me about your biggest challenges right now and how can I help, right? So that's a broad question. So while the manager is asking that question, really the direct is driving where that conversation goes. So it's still staying aligned with the goal. So one approach is you have these core questions. You even allow the direct to give their input on what core questions there should be. So that's one approach. The second approach, which I think works fabulously, is the listing approach, where you tell the direct, I want you to come to this one-on-one with a set of topics that you would like to talk about. But here's the key. The listing approach often doesn't work unless you prime the direct to really think short-term, long-term, individual, team, and organization and careers. Unless you prompt them, their list will just be things that they think you want to know about. So in creating the list, you say, listen, this meeting is not for me. Your list should reflect what's on your mind and your needs, and consider all these various topics and come to the meeting with your list. I'll have some things that I can talk to you about, but my list is secondary to yours. We're going to focus on you. And if we have time, I can get to, things that I might want to broach. But in general, this is your time. And so that's a great way of teeing up kind of the listing approach. So both of those, I think work very effectively. The key, though, is keep it fresh. So I meet with some leaders and they say, oh, I have the best core questions. They work so great. I do them every time with everyone. I'm like, that's great, but it's no longer working as you think, right? Because again, imagine a relationship where the person that you are having this relationship with only asks the same questions every time you meet. That's not a very exciting relationship. No, yeah. And so we need to diversify the questions. And I love when a manager says, hey, direct, let's generate some core questions together. What are some questions you would like me to ask in these one-on-ones? That is a nice signal, right? That this is a one-on-one designed to elevate the experience of those that work for you.
In this chapter, you talk about we need to be wary of the status update trap. And I see this happening all the time. Talk about it and why we need to be so cautious of it.
Well, the typical behavior, let me frame it this way. There are some common mistakes that managers make in one-on-ones. So one of them is the status update trap, where they just say, hey, give me a rundown. What's going on with A? What's going on with B? What's going on with C? What's going on with D? And that is not aligned with the goal of these meetings, right? Because that's clearly making the meeting about you and getting your informational needs met. And that sends the wrong message. Because again, you can get that information many, many different ways. This is just that small window of time that you're saying, this is yours, not mine. All right, so that's a common mistake. Another common mistake is a manager talking more than they're listening. That as a manager talks more than the direct, ratings of effectiveness drop. So the goal is for managers, for directs to talk 50 to 90% of the time. But this is actually harder than it appears, because research shows that when you talk a lot, it stimulates the same parts of your brain as sex and good food. So we talk about ourselves. We talk a lot because it feels good, but we need to give that gift to someone else. So, those are two common mistakes, and both can readily, be addressed, right? But it takes practice. And I do want to say that the direct report actually has a role in helping prevent these mistakes from happening. And let me give you a couple quick examples of the key roles that the directs can have, because I can't believe our time is almost winding down. This went so fast. So it takes two to tango. Right. So while the manager absolutely has the majority of the responsibility, the direct does have some responsibilities. And there's two things that tie into these common mistakes. First of all, a direct report cannot have their needs met unless they know what their needs are. You can't get what you want unless you know what you want. So directs really have to think thoughtfully, deeply before the one-on-one to identify what are their most pressing needs. When they have that information, now they're positioned to tee up questions around it. A second thing is when they see their manager engaging in good empathetic listening, they need to reinforce it. So when the manager says, "How can I help you?" the direct immediately has to say, "Thank you so much. I really appreciate you asking that." And that helps to shape these things for the future. Because sadly, taking a genuine interest in others is something we don't do a lot of, and we're
Mm,
not necessarily good with. We
mm,
tend to privilege our narratives, and we don't take the steps back and make the deep investments in others as much as we should. So reinforcing the types of behaviors aligned with empathetic listening, support, and care just increases the chances of these things happening.
mm.
So those are that. Yeah. So I'll stop there. There's so many, right? Because the book gets into a ton of common mistakes, and but those are two biggies.
All right. So we got just a couple minutes left. And so we're going to jump to chapter 10,
Okay.
which is how do I start and end one-to-ones, and the middle stuff too, which by the way, which I love that, which I love the question. And this is the pre-start, start, the heart, and the end. So if you kind of give us, as you wind this up, kind of give
Sure.
us that quick little rundown so that we kind of get a feel for it.
Sure. So we already talked about some good starting questions. And I think that's key. The start has a lot of pieces to it. It's picking the location, and I have data around that. It's kind of just reminding people to what the goal of these things are, priming folks to remember how this conversation should look, that this is not my meeting as a manager. So it's just helping set the stage. During the meeting itself, I outline a whole host of key facilitation behaviors. I'll emphasize this one here is just this notion that when we're conducting these one-on-ones, we're addressing people's tactical needs, but we also want to address their personal needs, right? So it's almost analogous to you go to a restaurant. If you have a great meal, right, that's akin to tactical needs. But if it's done with bad service, then it hasn't been a good experience. So the manager has to, be uncovering these tactical needs, but then address them with that really good empathetic listening, support, kindness, respect. And I'll give you a quick example of something that managers often do wrong is that when an employee brings a problem to them, they think they have to solve it immediately. That's not good for the relationship. The best action is when an employee brings you a problem, you say, well, what are your thoughts on the best way of handling it? What are some of your ideas, and explore it with them. And then pick your battles. If you have an idea for how to deal with it, if it's really meaningful and the gap is large and important, sure, intervene with your ideas. But otherwise, go with their idea, right? Because so often we accidentally demotivate others, right? When they share an idea and we say, well, here's another idea, and it's coming from a more powerful entity, you've created pressure to take your idea. So I'm not saying that you can't share a point of view. You can, and you should. What I'm saying is pick your battles. Let someone else have a go, especially because you don't know for sure your idea is the one and only idea. So pick your battles, choose wisely. If there's not a big, meaningful, important gap between their idea and yours, go with theirs. So, and then the end. The end is there's so much there, but the key is the end there has to be an ending. That's the key, right? So often meetings just end. That's not the same as having an ending. An ending is when you have a few minutes left, you stop and you go through what was talked about and the commitments that were made. And therefore, no one leaves the meeting wondering what was decided on or the next steps. So that's really key. And also end on a more positive note, right? We can always try to find something, right, where we can I look for something positive, right? So we often catch people doing something wrong. Let's make an effort to catch someone doing something right. And so look for an opportunity to find something positive. I'm not talking about being fake, but there's no way we can't find something positive. And then that helps just build the momentum for future one-on-ones.
That's beautiful. This has been awesome. Thank you for sharing your time with us and everybody around the world. Tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah. So definitely go to my website, StephenRogelberg.com, StephenRogelberg.com. I have a ton of resources on there. I really tried to make it into a good repository. There's book links there. There's so many topics that we just touched upon. One of the things that I know you would have really liked, Jay, and we just don't have time, is getting into how you can take these learnings and bring it into the home.
Yeah.
I think there's some really neat, powerful things there too. So definitely check out the website. Feel free to reach out to me via email. My contact information is there. And thank you. Thank you, Jay, for having me. And thank you in so many regards. The behaviors you did during this meeting are the exact behaviors we want to see managers doing. Good listening, right? Making, really privileging your guests, providing a structure, but not overly imposing, being flexible, right? Not overly rigid, all these things. So you're a good role model for your audience. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay with me, Stephen, real quick. Folks, this is the show. You know what I say to you every week, right? You're in control of three things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. I know that life can provide you with circumstances that could be difficult, but you still could control your attitude and how you respond to those things. Your effort is tied to your excellence. So how excellent do you want to be today? That's up to you. And we all get punched in the gut or knocked in the teeth now and then, but you make a choice of getting back up. Get back up. Take your attitude. Go with your best effort, whatever that might be. I could tell you that your life is going to improve. I'll be back next week with another great guest. It's going to be another great book. It promises to be another great show. You've had a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you. My heart is full of gratitude. As I say to you all over the world, you know what that is. Ciao, everybody.